Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the fourth episode of the Soccer Scene with myself, Adrian Finnan, joined once again by Noel O'Connor, and joined by a special guest this evening, John O'Shea of the Echo in Cork, as we preview Treaty United versus Cobh Ramblers at the Markets Field on Friday evening. John, it's fair to say, considering the unbeaten start, Cobh have had, confidence must be high in Coleman's Park.
Yeah, I think there's definitely I'd say maybe definitely a sense of even quite kind of confidence or optimism compared to the last couple of seasons, really. But I think even before Bob was kicked in terms of down with the Kerry game a couple of weeks ago, I think there was definitely I'd say there was kind of satisfaction that though the pre-season even they had gone fairly well and they were fairly pleased with the preparations and the camp, and I think it was obvious as well, in terms of the signings that they made and in terms of strengthening the squad. So it's probably it's probably the strongest squad they've had in quite a number of years there, really. So if you look at the additions they made around it, and one or two pretty kind of maybe surprise, maybe they might caught people by surprise, or they were definitely high kind of profile additions to the team. But you could even see in the early days, there's definitely a real sense that they're a lot more kind of solid, and they're going to be much tougher to beat. And I'd say they mightn't be like maybe for other teams they might be perceived maybe to be as much of the maybe a pushover as they might have been maybe in the last couple of seasons this year for sure.
Yeah, we did Noel allude to it early on in the campaign, or sorry, early on in our podcast previewing the season, that we'd obviously expected Cobh, to be much more competitive, not just considering their signings, but it felt like the only way, as John alluded to earlier, was up for Cobh Ramblers from last season. So I know it's only 3 games in, but I suppose I'm not overly surprised that they have picked up results early on.
They've had a great start, and we saw what happened halfway through the season last year when I think the chairman probably felt that a change of manager was what they needed, and it may well have been or not what they needed, but I think he expected the results to improve with a change of manager, and I suppose they didn't really. And then we heard a rallying call for financial support from the community or people to come on board, so that kind of led me to believe that he knew that someone had to put their hands in their pockets and maybe make the budget a bit bigger. That's obviously happened, and there's 3 or 4 off the top of our heads, good players gone down. A couple of lads from Galway, Charlie Lyons and Borero, and Jack Doherty of Waterford and Wexford, which probably was the most surprising even geographically. Seems to have had a good start. I think they got a good experienced keeper in as well, and those 3 or 4 players make a massive difference to a team, and ally that to a good start. They're certainly going to be a handful for the next few games.
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose to looking back at the game, I did see a vast majority of the game actually on Saturday evening, John. And I did see, Cobh, there was quite, surprisingly enough, I didn't think Cobh would do this, but they're basically playing 4-4-2 with leaving Jack Doherty right up next to Wilson Waweru for their games. I expected maybe Doherty to play a bit deeper, but he seems to be right up next to Waweru for those games. And they go quite direct, Cobh, from back to front in terms of trying to get the ball to their 2 more creative players in Waweru and Doherty as well. They didn't play particularly well on the night, I must say, in terms of keeping possession and the likes. But, I suppose Shane Keegan will look at it as saying they didn't play well, but they got a 0-0 draw away from home.
Yeah, I think exactly, and I think I was even just reading comments from in today's Examiner as well, from the game after the game Longford. He was saying that those kind of tight games, even when he came in towards the end of the second half of last season, those kind of tight games or high games that Cobh were losing last year. So the fact that even to go up to Longford and to even just come away with a point is, it's probably an overall, it was a positive. It was good just to get the draw, they get these points that the Cobh necessarily weren't getting last year. And I think a big part down to that, up and Longford, but even throughout the 3 games so far, I think you can even see the signs of already that the experience that's been brought into the team, especially in the back line, like Lee Stacey in goal as well. He's a real commanding presence, and his experience in the league, it's going to be massive for Cobh this season, and obviously someone who knows how to get promoted, obviously through his time with Longford Town, and he was on the PFAI, like the first division team in the season in 2019, but that solidity at the back, there looks like there is a lot more solid foundations there this season. Charlie Lyons as well coming back was a big addition to the club as well in the centre back, and himself and Brendan Frattle looked like they have the makings of a very solid partnership, and that's going to be very important going forward as well. I think another player, and possibly one of Cobh's best players in Longford last week, was a fullback, Cian Brown, who's come from Waterford, like Villa FC, and obviously even the FAI Junior Cup. That kind of experience, he's coming in. I think he was in Waterford's underage setup, was it actually a couple of years ago? But the fact he's coming from that kind of level of football, like the FAI Junior Cup, there's something big on the line. So like that you're coming like from men's football into League of Ireland, but he looks like he's impressed so far. Like he's kind of caught the eyes in terms of bombing up and down the flanks, the fullback positions, and like there definitely seems to be a lot more of a structure to Cobh this year, and it's definitely clear that they're kind of benefiting like from a full off season and a full pre-season for Shane Keegan under his belt as well.
Yeah, Noel, I suppose you'd understand this really, and John just alluded to it there. You'd understand the benefit of starting as early as possible. Particularly, I suppose Shane Keegan would have known, Noel, that there was an absolute huge body of work to be done with Cobh, as we know. But I do remember very early January, I think Cobh were one of the first, if not the first League of Ireland side I saw playing friendlies, and I think they must have had 6 or 7 games. Obviously, Shane Keegan felt that was vitally important, Noel, and it seems to be benefiting him early on in the season.
Absolutely, and I think the key for them, we're talking about going to Longford, and they may not, we don't really know yet, but they may not be the Longford team of old, if you like. Yeah. Although, they have certainly started very well, was that they kept their unbeaten run going. Like we said, their first game away to Kerry was always going to be a tricky game, with such a level of excitement with Kerry. They seemed to get the job done very, very professionally. And they followed that up with a really good home win against Wexford. Another team that, while they've lost a good few players, have recruited some good players as well. So I think he'll be really happy with that. I think you're right. I think they played about 7 pre-season games, including Munster Senior Cup games. And even the results, it wasn't even just playing the games. The results seem to be pretty good overall. And obviously that gave them a level of confidence. But there's no doubt that the actual recruitment side and players that he's brought in, the ones we even know are ones that we knew that were going to go straight into the first 11 and obviously make an improvement. And there seems to be 4 or 5 of those kind of players after coming in, and that certainly augurs well for them.
Yeah, absolutely. And an interesting enough stat, I suppose, John, that I looked at is I feel Cobh will be desperate to pick up a win, not just a draw against Treaty on Friday night, because they haven't actually beaten Treaty in the first 2 seasons of Treaty's existence. So very much so like Treaty not being able to beat Galway and having that bogey team on your back. It's like that for Cobh as well with Treaty United. So I'd say there's a bit of I wouldn't say desperation, but definitely a lot of motivation within the Cobh camp probably to put that right.
Yeah, I think so, and I think probably going to places like the Markets Field, and it's probably across the league generally as well. I think they might feel like they probably haven't, like especially the players who probably would have been there in the last season or two. They mightn't, maybe they feel they have a point to prove in this to show at this level that they're capable of getting the results that justify them being a team maybe that should be quite higher up the league and possibly even challenging for a playoff spot as well. But I think definitely you could see that. I think there definitely seems to be that creative spark there, and even from set pieces like Jack Doherty. So he was a fantastic addition to get into the club really. When I suppose when word filtered through that he was kind of leaving Wexford last year, I'd say a lot of people would have thought it was a Munster club that he was going to go to. It probably would have been Waterford or even Cork City in Premier Division football. So like it was a big statement, I think, for Cobh, like in terms of their intent to be much more competitive in the playoff picture, to get a player of his caliber in as well. And like it does excite, but not even like the likes of Weirdo and Jack Doherty. I think there's a few young players as well that could definitely have a big campaign this year, like Tyrone O'Brien as well, who's gone to Scorchy down in Kerry. Like he was in. I think he's still eligible actually to play for the under-19s in Cobh as well. He looks like a guy who could have a big campaign. He looks a good threat up front, and they've got he could potentially make his debut in Treaty. Claudio Osorio, who's after coming in on loan from Reading, and he actually played for Reading's first team, I think in the Carabao Cup in the last year or two as well. And he played underage for England. So there's definitely, I think he's probably coming over hoping to maybe kind of reignite his career potentially and go up the ranks and in the English football leagues. But so like it's definitely a move there that could benefit both parties in terms of the player and Cobh. So it'll be exciting to see how he does and how he gets on. But yeah, I think overall I think the squad that's there, they're going to go up. I think, and there's a belief, I think that they can get results off most teams in the division, and they'll be hoping to hopefully get a result now on Friday against Treaty.
Yeah, and admittedly, John, I haven't seen much of Shane Keegan in terms of interviews and the likes. But I'm assuming just because of how open the division is, maybe especially from below Galway, maybe Waterford, below maybe Bray. So between the positions anyway of 3rd to 8th or 9th in this league, realistically, it is wide open. I assume a playoff challenge is definitely minimum for Shane Keegan and his squad now.
I think with the squad that's there, I think there's definitely no reason why they shouldn't at least be looking to be challenging even for the 4th place or 5th place and those particular positions and those playoff spots. But like definitely one thing from talking to Shane Keegan in the off season and then from even listening to other like in his kind of media interview so far as well over the last couple of months that he was kind of saying the targets like even at the very minimum like to be going into the last stage of the season the Cobh should be, if they're not in the playoff spot, it's something that's still achievable for them, because like in the last couple of seasons, like especially the last year or two, they've had essentially like they even when he came in last year as well, like the season was effectively over in terms of trying to compete. Like obviously when there's no relegation from the first division, and they were too far behind realistically at that stage to kind of mount the challenge for the playoffs. So I would definitely think going into the final quarter or the final maybe 5-10 games of the season, I'd say the minimum target for them would be to definitely to be at least be in the hunt for a playoff spot. But I think definitely, and I think the early results maybe have shown it across the league as well. You know, and I think it depends. Obviously Galway and Waterford, in Waterford have got maybe a bit of a blip so far, but like that you would expect the 2 full-time teams maybe ultimately will kind of it's fit to go towards the top of the table. But then I think after that, it is, as you say, it's going to be a wide open division. But I think definitely Cobh, if they are solid at the back and if they can take their chances at the other end of the field, like there's definitely, I'd say there's no reason so far there's no reason why they shouldn't be thinking like a playoff spot is something that's not achievable, because it definitely looks like something that could be that should be a realistic target, especially given how wide open the division is going to be. And like a lot of teams are going to take points off each other right throughout the season, but it looks of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Noel, I know that myself and yourself in our pre-season predictions don't have Cobh in the playoff spots, but that doesn't necessarily mean that I don't think they'll be challenging for it. Do you believe, like similar to John, that it should be a minimum expectation that they should be probably, I suppose, if you're looking at the last season, be in a position like Wexford maybe, where they're within reach and distance in the last 3-4 games of the season?
Yeah, I think so. And I think, look, we spoke about Wexford improving last year, and I said how difficult it is to improve by 4 or 5 places. And we're asking Cobh now to do the same thing. And look, just to mention one, Jack Doherty, and obviously he's a very, very good player. But I suppose if you are going to have a caveat over him, it's his ability to do it over a whole season, or to be consistent week in, week out. To create and score goals. And I think that he has yet to do that really. To propel a team, if you like, into the playoffs or into the top 5, and that's probably the challenge for him and a few more players, and you're just spot on in terms of, I think the 1, 2, 3 in a round will be Waterford, Galway, and Bray, and after that, it's a real toss of a coin, and a team could be 4th or 7th or 8th, and I think there will be a lot of teams still fighting for a couple of playoff places, when we do get into that final series of games. And I would expect Cobh to be thereabouts, but you could be 4th or 5th one day and end up 7th or 8th as well. So it's very hard to call. They've had a good start, which is great. It's a long season, we know that. And as I said, some of these guys just have to show that they can do it over a full season.
Yeah, absolutely. I know obviously that, John, another team that had a draw, Treaty United drew with Kerry we'd probably see that as a disappointing result, particularly the fact that Kerry went down to 10 men after an hour as well in that game. The one positive was then the Curran got off the score sheet. He's going to be a big danger, and that's obviously one of the key battles as well, isn't it? Curran against both Lyons and Frahill at centre back. Another battle where, you know, that I think will be quite important could even be, as you said, Tiernan O'Brien, who has had a really good start for Cobh Ramblers, both in pre-season and this season, particularly in the first two games. I was very impressed with him in the first half against Wexford, in particular at St. Cohen's Park. So himself and up against Mark Ludden, with all the experience Ludden has, you know, obviously we'll be hoping to shackle him, but that could be an interesting battle too. As well as also on the other side of the field, considering Treaty's problems at right full back in the last game or two, it could be an opportunity for both wingers to Cobh to make an impact in the Marks field.
Oh yeah, it's absolutely. You know, it's there's going to be a number of intriguing kind of battles right across the pitch, like as you alluded to there, like by the wing, and especially with style like and even there's in terms of the managers as well, possibly on their day, like if you're listing the top managers in the league, I think the likes of Shane Key and especially Tommy Bowers, what he's done with Treaty, they definitely would be kind of near the top end of your list for sure. But yeah, and I think even with Treaty as well, another point that'll be interesting as well, that there's a lot of players as well who would be familiar with Cobh and with Cobh interest in the side as well. Like Anto O'Donnell, who's kind of really established himself as a fan's favourite in Treaty. The likes of Lee Devitt, who probably was really underrated when he was at Cobh. To be honest, he was very consistent and he was definitely a reliable operator when he was there. And then obviously in goal as well, I think Shane Hallinan, I think who played down in Kerry.
His debut in Kerry. Yeah,
and then I think he's from Cobh. I think he's from Cobh as well, Cobh native. So yeah, there'll be a lot of there's definitely a lot of kind of on both sides as well. There'll be definitely a few kind of intriguing battles on Friday night.
Yeah, absolutely, and thanks to yourself, John, for joining us to talk all things Cobh and give a quick preview to the game on Friday. Obviously, we hope that Treaty United will come out on top, but thank you once again, John, and I hope we will be just talking about Cobh Ramblers with you again at some stage throughout the season.
Perfect. Thanks for having me on, lads.
Right, John.
Without further ado, we must discuss all things and focus all things at Treaty United. I suppose we have to start, Noel, with the draw with Kerry FC. I was actually on a local radio show a couple of hours ago, and when I was thinking back about the game, obviously on the night, I was quite disappointed with the result. I suppose, Noel, the reason I was more disappointed was the fact that the circumstances behind it, as you said. You know, Kerry down to 10 men after 60 minutes and Treaty didn't make that numerical advantage count. I know they had chances, maybe a couple of chances spurned. You know, Alec Byrne had a half chance, Martin Coughlin had a free header, and Conor Barry blazed over as well. But you know, I suppose, would you agree that it was, you know, a game where it was 2 points dropped rather than a point gained?
Yeah, I think there's no doubt they would have felt that it was 2 points dropped. I think it was the first half really was their undoing in that. Thought they had a lot of really, really good chances in the first half. It was a very open game. I thought Kerry were quite naive in the way they were playing in terms of the amount of frees that they were giving away. I thought they were indisciplined, maybe over enthusiastic, and you know, with the crowd and the naivety. For them, there's so many players that haven't played in the league before. And you know, you have to have a cool head, and particularly sometimes the way they attacked, I thought they left their defence very open on a few occasions, particularly as we said already, and they won't mind me saying us that the two centre halves wouldn't be the quickest. Particularly the left full, I thought you know, that they look very open, and I felt that was Treaty's time, you know, to capitalise on that and maybe to subdue the crowd. But then the opposite happened in terms of Kerry going in front. And even when Treaty equalised, I thought they could have done a lot more. Say, you know, they needed probably to go after them straight away and try and put the game to bed nearly, if you like. And they didn't, you know, they just left them hanging there, if you like. And the most disappointing thing for me was the fact that, you know, Treaty were playing with an extra man for the last half an hour. And, you know, you do speak about chances there, and look, I don't think they were actually really guilty of chances that they created. I thought they created very little in that half an hour. I thought they didn't play like they should have played, you know, against a team that only had 10 men. They didn't get enough width in the pitch, didn't get after the Kerry full backs. They needed to get more crosses in. We spoke about how effective Enda Curran is when he's in the opposition penalty box. Does really when there's balls coming in from wide areas. Yet, you know, even the substitutions, you know, we're kind of removing those options first in terms of Willie Armstrong going off, and then as the game went on, you know, your two highest goal scorers from the last 12 months, you know, with 30 goals between them, and you know, at that crucial part of the game, the two of them are sitting on the bench, and you're just wondering where the goal is going to come from.
Yeah, that is, I suppose that's the biggest concern, really, Noel, isn't it? From the first 3 games, in that three, they've obviously scored 1 goal. I did mention that it was a positive that Enda Curran scored. But looking at, you know, chance creation, I know that a lot of maybe Treaty fans were saying that they, you know, created a few chances against Bray. I didn't see the bombardment that some Treaty fans saw in the night, to be honest with you, although they were on top for maybe a 20-minute period in that second half. But overall, that's probably a concern, isn't it? You know, the lack of chances created. But I suppose also, like, when you look at the chances of the first half, Dean George maybe should have probably scored 2 goals and didn't. So that, as I said a couple of times already, that it's a concern early on.
Yeah, and that was the one I felt. There was one time he seemed to have the freedom of the park there. The ball was switched out to the left. I know sometimes it's difficult to watch it on the camera to get a real sense of who's around, but seemed to have the freedom of the park. The ball was switched over to the left, and he was in splendid isolation. He got into the box, and I just thought that, you know, he should have done a lot better. But then, you know, it's kind of as much as the attitude as well. You know, I didn't just see them. They need to really take the game to them, and I didn't see that happen, and that's the most disappointing part. I don't know whether there was a lack of energy, particularly in the second half. As I say, you know, you would have felt that they should have been bombarding them and camped in the Kerry half, and that didn't really happen. And a lot of times I felt that Kerry got out too easy. You know, when Treaty did have the ball in the Kerry half and maybe had the ball around the penalty box, Kerry seemed to get out very easy. And I suppose the best chance fell to Kerry in the last 20 minutes, where Kaksak, you know, he went clean through, showed a clean pair of heels, and just hit the ball the wrong side of the post. And I think if that ball was on target, well, then bad and all as the point was, it could have ended up being 0 points and 3 points for Kerry, which would have been a real bitter pill to take, you know, so early in the season.
Yeah, I know that we mentioned it. I mentioned it in one of my preview pieces that Leo Gaska was going to be an important player for Kerry. He was on the night. Noel, as you say, he probably could have got the winner, or definitely a second goal anyway for Kerry with that chance. He did look lively. He did set up the first goal as well, which I suppose from a Treaty point of view, Noel, it was a slow start, but originally, but you know, it was a disappointing goal to concede. We know Ben Reardon had a tough night at the office. He was taken off at half time and replaced by Mark Walsh at right back, but Mark Walsh was playing in midfield. Alec Byrne had come on later on the game as well. Colin Conroy came on for Ben Reardon, but he was beaten quite easily down the left-hand side. And then Sean Kennedy was more alert maybe than Mark Ludden at the front post to prod home, which I suppose, you know, obviously it was a disappointing way. Any goal is disappointing to concede, Noel, but it was a bit disappointing.
Yeah, look, and I think from the first night, I mentioned it after the Bray game, you know, that it looked like that our fullbacks were very exposed. I felt the same against Galway. You know, we mentioned Ronan Manning here last week and Ed McCarthy, and, you know, the two dominant nights they had, you know, maybe not 90 minutes of dominance, but certainly they had their periods of dominance. And I think it is a bit of a worry when, you know, we are talking about Kerry. And my sum up of them early was, I thought there was Kennedy who played well, Gaxt obviously, you know, we spoke about Matt Keane, knew he was going to have a good game. He played well. But overall, I felt that they had 3 or 4 weak players as well. Kerry, you know, that obviously are new to this level, and, you know, I thought that overall Treaty should have been stronger than them, you know, with the experience they have, yet they couldn't convert that superiority into results. But once again, you know, we're talking about the Treaty fullbacks and the right side in particular, and just how easy that they got down there. You know, particularly in a turnover of possession, like I said, you know, they just seemed to get out very easy. There was one pass and they were out, and next thing they were running at the Treaty full backs. On this side, I think it was more down the Treaty right side maybe than Mark Ludden's side. I know you talk about the cross coming from the opposite side, and here we are 3 games in and we've had 3 different right backs, which is, you know, probably not really where you want to be. And, you know, you just wonder what was happening in pre-season, and maybe it might have been better maybe to go to Shamrock Rovers, you know, with a first team rather than an under-19 team, and try and, you know, sort some of these issues out. But it certainly is a worry now going into this game, and we need to come up with a solution fairly quick, you know, for a consistent back four, because even if you went back, you know, to the season before last, and, you know, that the thing we spoke about every week was the kind of solid defence, bar an odd glitch maybe from Charlie Fleming, but certainly this year already, you know, it does look a little bit ropey at the back.
Yeah, and I suppose in terms of preparing for Cobh, Noel, that is obviously an issue. It's hard to judge Mark Walsh, Noel, at right back, because when he went in there after about 5 minutes, Kerry went down to 10 men, and you know, it was just hard to judge it on that particular maybe 25-minute, half an hour period. But you know, do you think going into this game that it's something he could do, Tommy Barrett, in playing Mark Walsh at right full and then join in Alec Byrne, the former Corkman, who did come on in with Lee Devitt into midfield?
Yeah, I think there's a good chance of that. I think from what I've seen of Mark Walsh, I don't think he'd let you down no matter where you put him, to be fair to him. Certainly maybe the 4 defensive positions and probably centre midfield and right in midfield. You know, if you were playing against a team that were going to have a lot of possession, I don't think that he would disappoint you. He looks the obvious choice now, and I think you're right. It was certainly hard to judge him when Kerry went down to 10 men, but I've never seen him really have, you know, what I consider to be a really bad game. I thought Alec Byrne might have started against Kerry. I thought, you know, once again, we're talking about Matt Keane having a good game, and it's another worry for Treaty in terms of the opposition midfielders seem to be doing very well. I thought it would have been a good game to start him. Look, it isn't that, you know, it's his debut. He's not like the Kerry guys, whatever. He's plenty of experience in the league. He knows what it takes to win a league, and I think it would be a good idea to start him on Friday night to try and get a semblance of control, because I think what he did try to do was he certainly tried to get things going and move the team forward. I saw him at one stage playing out on the right, I think, but he obviously saw the need, you know, that they needed to get a bit of width, particularly against 10 players, to try and get a couple of decent balls in the box. So I would expect him to start, and I think himself and Lee Devitt will do quite well. It would be nice to see Treaty at home, maybe to control the ball a little bit more and maybe recycle the ball a little bit more. I think Mark Walsh, you know, in the short term certainly is probably our best bet at right back, and it certainly is a big game.
Yeah, it certainly is, Noel. And as I said, I have watched I have watched Cobh against Wexford for a good majority, and against Longford in recent weeks. There was 4-4-2, and as I said, they were quite direct in trying to get the ball forward to Doherty and Ware with every opportunity, particularly against Longford away from home, probably a ploy away from home, obviously, from Coleman's Park. But you were saying there you'd like to see Treaty, obviously, you know, maybe dominate the ball a bit more than usual. And I suppose if Cobh do come with that mindset of, you know, trying to keep a clean sheet, but also giving you the ball back, because if they do lump balls forward to Aweru and Jack Doherty, you are hoping that Anto O'Donnell, with his physicality, will be able to mop up most things. So then, you know, I suppose the emphasis is on the likes of your Lee Devitts and maybe likes of an Alec Byrne and Conor Barry, who played in the number 10, to, you know, dictate affairs then.
Yeah, and I think
they will have one more, Noel, actually, as well, won't they, in midfield, if that is the way Cobh play again.
Yeah, and I think, like, you are right, and you would expect, like, it will be meat and drink to the Treaty back four, and not just the centre backs, but we're having Mark Walsh right back and Mark Ludden as left back. Long high balls are certainly meat and drink to them, and that's never our worry. It's our worry when someone is running at them with the ball, if you like. And with someone like Alec Byrne in the middle, and, you know, Lee Devitt, you'd expect him to try and pick up a few second balls and get the ball to Alec Byrne. He's probably a player that we haven't really had in the middle of the park, and you know, he may be what Enda Kern needs as well. And you're right, and Enda Kern is off the mark now with a goal, and he'll be determined to score at home as well. And with someone like Alec Byrne on the pitch, he may just give him the ammunition that he's desperately looking for.
Yeah, absolutely. Football is such a fickle game, as we know, Noel. So you get 3 games without a win, and there's a bit of supporter unrest, even though considering how well it's been for the last 2 years, you know that as well as anyone. But Tommy Barrett has said that a couple of times in interviews that, and it has been true. If you think about it, Treaty have got off the mark early in their last few seasons in terms of victories, the last couple of seasons, and it has, I suppose, been a relief to them, that monkey's off your back. You're now going into the game against Cobh, and this is your 4th game in front of your own supporters. And if you don't get the victory, the pressure just grows. So they will be really hoping to get off the mark now against Cobh.
There's no doubt. Look, we spoke about momentum. I think we speak about it every year. It's really, really important. Look, the supporter unrest won't be really bothering the Treaty players, but they'll be desperate to get off the mark as well. Like, they're not traveling here, to lose every week, and they've had a couple of years of relative success as well, and they'll want to be in that top 5. And it said it is certainly a different division this year. There was certainly kind of a split the last couple of years, and the split is harder to see now. It's more blurred, if you like, and it is going to be competitive, and you certainly don't want to be cut adrift, so early in the season. At the moment, if you're looking at it, there is, and I know Tommy says this all the time, but particularly now with that Kerry game out of the way, there's certainly no easy games coming up in the next few weeks. Every team seems to be competitive. I suppose except for Finn Harps, they look like they might have been a team that it wouldn't have been any harm to play at the start of the season, because sometimes you find a team is struggling, in the first couple of games, but by the time you meet them, they're up and running. So look, they're at home. It's Cobh. I know they brought in a few players, but Treaty have a lot of really good players. I'm sure Shane Keegan would swap a few Cobh players for Endicott in a heartbeat. So there's still a lot to be positive about, but I think they certainly have to play on the front foot and maybe not be as kind of standoffish, for want of a better word, or passive as I thought they were last week. They need to grab this game by the scruff of the neck and go on the front foot and try and get an early goal and put a few doubts into the Cobh players' minds.
Yeah, we certainly do need to see that from Treaty, and we hope we do see that from Treaty. They've normally responded in the past when their backs have been against the wall, so this will be a big test for them, obviously. Noel, just look at another couple of the results. You've obviously already alluded to Cobh Ramblers drawing 0-0 away at Longford. You had Finn Harps drawing 1-1 with Bray Wanderers. Finn Harps took the lead in that one. Harry Groom got an equaliser for Bray. Also, you had Wexford getting off the mark with a 3-0 victory over Athlone. Aaron Robinson and Aaron Dobbs on the score sheet. Robinson got 2 goals in that game. He'll be a big player for Wexford, you'd imagine, like he was for Longford last year. I suppose a huge win as well for John Caulfield and his Galway side. Vincent Borden getting on the score sheet. That's 3 goals in 3 games for him away at Waterford. That was a big win, although obviously, it is early in the season. Any big takeaways for any of those results, Noel?
No, I think it's a really big win for Galway. I thought it was very important for them to get a good start because of all the negativity that we spoke about, at the end of last season. And, I think if they had a bit of a glitch, if they had a kind of a Treaty start, I think the pressure on them would be absolutely immense. And look, you have to hand it to them. They went down to Waterford, they kept a clean sheet. And, I just saw the goal actually. And, it was a decent header at the back post, but then you'd wonder why, teams don't still have players on the back and the front post for corners, just to make those goals a little bit smaller. But look, a great win for them. I see that the Athlone title challenge has evaporated a little bit with their 3-0 defeat to Wexford, and that'll be a big boost to them as well. I'm sure that James Kelly was feeling a bit of pressure there as well. Didn't get the start they wanted, but now they're 3 points, and as I said, it's all about momentum, and the games are going to be so competitive, and there's so little between maybe 6 or 7 of the teams that it really will be hard to predict. But that momentum is certainly going to be very important, and keeping your top players fit will be very important.